Hi, I'm Tony Van Veen, CEO of Discmakers. If you've been an artist for longer than, a few months, you've probably heard that the music industry has long had a royalty collection problem. Yes, I'm talking about the infamous black box. The black box represents hundreds of millions in mechanical royalties to publishers and songwriters who cannot be tracked down to get paid for one reason or another. So welcome to part one of my two-part series about black box royalties, what they are, why they exist, and how you can collect yours. In this video, I'll explain how we got here, what the Music Modernization Act is, and how the Mechanical Licensing Collective was created to track, collect, and pay royalties more effectively. Then in part two, I will explain what you need to do to make sure all your royalties are tracked and how you can collect any black box royalties that you might be owed. Black box royalties are a topic that get songwriters fired up, and rightfully so. I get fired up when I think about them even. Historically, there have been multiple black boxes. The company responsible for collecting mechanical royalties for US music sales, historically, the Harry Fox Agency, they had one. Each of the large performing rights societies, or PROs, like ASCAP and BMI and CSAC, have one. And there were other PROs and organizations around the world that each had their own black boxes of unpayable royalty revenues. How did we get into this mess? Well, due to a combination of factors, but mostly for three reasons. The main one is missing or inaccurate metadata. Now let me start by reminding you what metadata is. Basically, it is the data that describes the data of your music. So it's your UPC code, your ISRC number, your songwriter and publisher and artist names, and song and album information. This information allows every sale and stream of your music to be tracked all along the process, and royalties to be paid for those sales and streams. Combine the inaccurate metadata for millions of tracks with multiple organizations charged with collecting royalties, each with their own incomplete databases, and you end up with multiple piles of unpayable royalties at multiple performance rights organizations. The number two reason is there are issues with notices of intent from streaming services. If a streaming service wants to legally stream your music, it needs to serve a notice of intent, or an NOI, to the appropriate rights holder or their PRO. However, in practice, there was always lots of confusion about these NOIs, whether they were actually issued or not, and how many PROs and rights holders claimed they didn't receive them from the DSPs. The digital service providers, as streaming firms are referred to in the industry. In the past, this resulted in multiple lawsuits against the DSPs, which is something that clearly nobody wants, certainly the industry badly wants to avoid. And then reason number three is there were always multiple PROs involved in tracking and collecting and paying royalties. Of course, there's the streaming companies, each with their own incomplete databases, who track the plays and report to collective management organizations around the world, like the Harry Fox Agency in the US. And then there are other PROs, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC in the US, plus dozens of others worldwide, each trying to collect their royalties. When you combine poor or missing metadata with multiple organizations, each with their own distinct and incomplete databases and less than watertight processes for issuing NOIs, you quickly end up with a black box worth hundreds of millions of dollars in untraceable royalties. And that's just for downloads and streaming. And one of the biggest challenges with black box royalties was that after these royalties were collected and held onto for a certain amount of time so their owners could be searched for, some of the PROs ended up splitting up and paying out the black box revenue to the publishers that they could track down based on market share. So in effect, they took publishing royalties from most likely independent artists and songwriters who they could not track down and paid them to the big guys. Pretty mind-blowing, right? Kind of makes you angry. For decades, private companies have attempted to create the definitive archive of all the world's music metadata and copyright information to no avail. Every private effort created yet another organization with an incomplete database in an ocean of such agencies. Enter the US Congress. In order to clean up some of this mess and pay royalties to rights holders faster and more accurately, Congress in 2018 signed the Music Modernization Act into law. As a result, in 2019, the US Copyright Office breathed life into the Mechanical Licensing Collective, the MLC, a nonprofit organization established to administer blanket mechanical licenses to eligible streaming services in the US and to pay the resulting royalties to songwriters, composers, and music publishers. Today, because of the Music Modernization Act and the MLC, instead of having to issue NOIs to multiple rights holders, the music streaming services can instead pay one blanket license to the MLC that covers all mechanical royalty costs to all rights holders, thereby protecting themselves from possible lawsuits, which is a good thing. From there, the MLC takes on the responsibility of locating and paying the appropriate rights holders the royalty they are entitled to. Who does the MLC collect for? Well, let me say this slowly for clarity. The MLC collects digital audio mechanical royalties from streaming and download services in the US. You see, when a song is streamed, there are two royalties due. A royalty on the sound recording, which is paid to the label or the artist, and a royalty on the composition, the mechanical royalty paid to the songwriter or the publisher. Essentially, you can think of the MLC as a performance rights organization, like ASCAP or BMI, but different, that just collects mechanical royalties from digital downloads and streams in the US, whose mission it is to pay those royalties accurately to the songwriters and the publishers of those compositions. Therefore, if you are a US publisher or songwriter, you need to be affiliated with the MLC either directly or indirectly. If you are outside the US and are affiliated with a local collective management organization, or CMO, like MCPS in the UK or AMCOS in Australia, they are already affiliated with the MLC and are likely authorized to collect your US mechanical royalties for you. It is also worth mentioning what the MLC does not collect, which is everything that is not a mechanical royalty for US music downloads and streams. They do not collect mechanicals for physical media. They do not collect the public performance or international radio play royalties that PROs like ASCAP and BMI collect. They do not collect for video streams on YouTube and TikTok. And they do not collect royalties for streaming or sales outside the US. So, how's it been going so far? Well, the good folks at the MLC have been hard at work trying to clean up some of the historical mess. And it was a mess. And yes, like with any such big agency, the MLC has faced criticism about their high overhead costs and the fact that there is still a big black box of unpaid royalties sitting out there. But now, this black box is in the MLC's coffers. The thing worth noting, however, is that despite the pot shots at the MLC, they really are trying hard to get songwriters paid. In fact, several of the MLC board members represent independent songwriters because they are independent songwriters, and the MLC has been proactively reaching out to PROs and to independent music distributors like CD Baby to try and locate as many songwriters as they can find. And yet, despite the hard work of the MLC and of these blanket licenses, Since the MLC has been collecting and accruing the royalties of digital audio streams for independent and majors alike, the current black box sits at a whopping $424 million, waiting for their songwriters and publishers to be paid. So who is owed this money? Well, it could be you. For sure, it's mostly unsigned, independent, and emerging songwriters. Why? Well, for starters, major songwriters tend to be signed to major publishing companies. Those music publishers have full-time staffs dedicated to making sure that song metadata is correct. Therefore, the DSPs and the MLC can accurately track the vast majority of major published titles. Things are not quite so clean on the indie songwriter side. For starters, if you were an artist distributing your music digitally before 2010, it is quite possible that your music doesn't even have ISRC numbers, which every track needs to have in order to be tracked, so to speak. Why? Because in the early days of digital music distribution, tracks could be delivered to the DSPs without ISRCs attached. The DSPs did not demand them, and some distributors just didn't issue them. In addition, the proper collection of metadata just wasn't a priority for distributors until relatively recent. And frankly, independent artists frequently just aren't very good at sweating the small technical details of giving proper credit to songwriters when they sign up their tracks for distribution. The end result? It is extremely likely that the MLC is trying to pay the bulk of their $424 million in black box royalties to independent songwriters like you. In fact, you may be owed royalties right now. In my next video, I will discuss what this means for you, the songwriter, what you need to do to collect all your streaming mechanicals, whether you need to go out and register your own songs with the MLC, and whether you'll be able to collect any of those black box royalties. I hope you'll join me then.